I need to just not touch my microphone.
Think your microphone's on the blink. Is it on the blink or on the brink? I never know.
I say brink.
Oh, I say blink. I don't know if that's right.
Because you're on the brink, so you're on the edge, is it not? That's how I think
Like
it
on
is.
the edge of breaking.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I don't know why I say blink, but I guess actually I do. Because I think of like a light bulb, and if a light bulb is about to break or go out, it blinks, it's like on off. So that's why I say on the blink. Which one is it?
Because I don't understand why people say I could care less. I'm like, don't you mean you couldn't care less? Because if
Isn't
you
it
could
I
care
couldn't care
less, then
less?
you'd care less. But saying, oh, I could care less, you're saying that you could care less. I don't get it. But the point is you're saying I just couldn't care less. I don't get it.
See, I thought the expression was I couldn't care less.
Yeah,
Because of
so
that
did I.
reason.
But then I hear people say, oh, I could care less. And I'm like, yo, I don't think you're using that right.
That doesn't make sense.
No.
Unless we're missing something.
It wouldn't surprise me.
What, that I'm missing something?
I'm missing something. And we're just totally oblivious. We're just butchering the English language on a daily basis.
Maybe we put it to the listeners. What is it? On the blink or on the brink? And
It's got to be
I couldn't care less.
Couldn't has got to be the logical thing to say, because it doesn't make sense.
True.
Anyway.
But anyway, yeah, please tell us, listeners, if you have the answers. We could just Google it, but let's open the debate. Tell us which one it is.
Yeah, I'm curious to know actually what people say.
Yeah. Anyway, how's your week been, Katy?
I've spent the week feeling like I don't know what day it is. So I just don't even, and I don't even know, you know how sometimes you're like, oh, it's Tuesday, but it feels like a Wednesday? It's not even that. I just doesn't feel like a day.
Just completely
Who knows?
going with the flow sounds.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm all right. I've felt a bit like mooky the last few days.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by that?
I think so.
I like the word mooky. I discovered this word from Will, so I don't know if it's actually like a term that people use or it's a Williamism. It's like when you're just feeling a bit out of sorts, a little bit low, a bit meh. Meh. That's probably a good way of wording it. Yeah. That's how I've been feeling. I'm feeling actually better today. I'm out of the mookiness today.
That's good.
Feel like one of the reasons, and it will tie into our theme today, so I'm going to share it.
Okay, please do.
Is I had family visiting at the weekend, and it was really lovely to see family. Just like, obviously, I get along with them, and we had a really nice time. I also found myself being really snappy and short and irritable with family, and the time in the weekend, I didn't really know why I was being like that. And you know, when you're being a certain way, and you're aware that you're being a certain way, and you don't want to be like that because you're like, I don't know why I'm snapping. I don't know why I'm just being really miserable and grumpy. You don't feel able to stop yourself from being like that because that's the mood that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt all weekend. And it really annoyed me because obviously I wanted to enjoy my time with my family without being like that. Because they don't come and visit me that often because they live quite far away. And I was just really annoyed that I was like that. And it's now Wednesday, and they left on Monday morning. And like Monday and Tuesday, that was what was like contributing to that mooky mood that I was having. And I was feeling guilty for being like that around them when they'd come to visit. And lots of emotions came out of it. So I'm sharing this because it does tie well to our theme of what we're going to talk about today, which is, Katy.
You always put me on the spot like that, and my brain goes blank. If I think we're on the right thing, weekend binging? Like recovering from a weekend binge? That Monday morning mix of emotions that we'll talk about today. I think anyone who struggles with disordered eating or an eating disorder is going to relate to.
Yeah. And I guess it's a follow on from our last episode, which was about weekend bins and what contributes to them. So yeah, we're talking about what can you do after a binge that might help. I feel like what we'll talk about will probably be applicable to a lot of binges, not just weekend binges.
Mhm.
I don't know. We'll see. You might have really different techniques for after a weekend versus a midweek binge. I don't know.
I was thinking about this morning, and when I was in recovery and I was committed to recovery and I was working with someone, I was in a much more open place to try different things. I'm trying to think back to how I would feel if like I had just had a really horrible weekend where I'd been binging and I'd had especially the Sunday evening binges where you wake up Monday morning and for me I was still full, which is so uncomfortable because it's like this constant reminder of what you've done. You
Mm.
can't escape that physical discomfort that you feel. And the last thing you want to do is put on like your work clothes and go and sit in an office or whatever. The last thing you want to do is face people, at least that's how I felt. And that it's challenging because in that headspace, in that Monday morning, I probably wouldn't have been open to hearing the things that we'll probably talk about today. Do
Mm.
you know what I mean? If you'd have told
Yeah.
me in that moment, explained how me feeling awful about myself and the self blame and the self hatred that I was absorbed in was actually perpetuating the cycle, I would have resisted that.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to think of a way to approach this conversation, taking into account where people may be when they're listening to it.
No, that really does make sense. As you were saying it, it actually made me realize that when I was going through my recovery, listening to something like this about what you can do post binge was probably more helpful for me to listen to when I wasn't actually post binge,
Hmm.
because then I could absorb that information and with a bit more openness, like you described. And then it would be putting it into practice and experimenting with it would be then post binge.
Yes. So
That's
it's
when I'd put it into practice.
kind of like getting your head around a concept of doing something before there's the pressure to actually actively do it.
Yeah.
I can remember seeing binge eating recovery content on my Instagram and people talking about how to separate yourself from the guilt and the shame that you feel and how that's not actually helpful. And the best thing you can do is to eat as normal, do the opposite to what you feel you should do, all this kind of stuff. And I was so resistant to it. The algorithm being the algorithm, it kept showing that stuff up. And it was something that I really had to see for a good few months before I could get my head around the idea that, like, maybe that was something that would help me or something that I felt I could try. But I think if I hadn't have let it sit and marinate for a bit,
Mm. Yeah.
I think there would have been too much of a fight. I think I would have just shut the idea down straight away.
I think for me, it depends what the advice is. There's approaching it from a mental perspective of how do we deal with the feelings of guilt and shame and judgment. And then there's also the physical part of what can we do to physically navigate how we feel in our bodies due to the binge and like the fullness from that and what's going on in our bodies as we're digesting food. I think mental piece, I would have been quite resistant to if I heard it post binge, but the physical side, not so much. So things like some things that helped me physically post binge would be wearing baggy clothes, like
Hmm.
wearing loose, comfortable, baggy clothes. Even if I've got to go to work, like having something that feels comfortable so I don't have to wear something fitted or something that is, especially around my stomach area, that's fitted around my stomach area and is that reminder of that, the bloating that I'm probably experiencing. That I would probably be open to hearing that post binge because that's something that I can actually take action with right now and feel the benefits of right now as well, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, that would be something that I would jump onto. Other things like, I guess, another thing that helped me would be like changing the location of where I am as well. So this one might not always be applicable if you're still feeling this on the Monday morning and you're at work. But post binge for me, instead of sitting in the room where I have had the binge and surrounded by whatever wrappers are left there, just sitting in that kind of that stagnant energy that you can feel in the area that you've had the binge, it would be as simple as you go into a different room just to change that energy that's around me. Obviously, if you're at work and you're still feeling like the physical side of it, that might be something like, whilst I'm at work, can I bring in some kind of gentle movement just to shift the energy in my body? And I'm not talking about here exercise to compensate for the binge at all. Like, big disclaimer, that's not what I'm referring to. I don't think that is a helpful approach, but just think like, could I go for a walk and get some fresh air? Or am I able to do some stretches? Because those are the kind of things that just shift energy in our body. That's the way I feel it. Like, I often think of things post binge in terms of energy that's like blocked and stagnant in our body, and we need to move it around to get through it.
Yeah. I particularly like the baggy clothes. That was always super helpful. And oddly enough, the changing your environment if you can. Because for me, it was always going to work on that Monday morning. And I would wake up and every part of me just wanted to hibernate. The last thing I wanted to do was get out of bed. I felt so ashamed of what I'd done. I didn't want to face the world. I didn't want to have to deal with being in my body and what that would feel like for the day. The last thing I wanted to do was to be around people. And I have memories of driving to the office, like crying because I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to face this. But actually finding that the thing I didn't want to do was actually one of the most helpful things I could do, because being in the office gave me distraction. It gave me some purpose and it made me refocus myself, but really couldn't do the gentle movement piece, because the gentle movement, any kind of movement, felt like it was bringing the attention to my body. And post binge, I just didn't want to be in my skin. So for me, that always felt, no, I just need to distract myself. The gentle movements bringing attention to my body and how my body feels. And I cannot manage that, which I find it's interesting how different things work for different people, don't they? I think this was always one of the hardest things for me, because I really believed that if I could feel bad enough about myself post binge, that it would create change, that I could change the behavior. So my instinct on that Monday morning, as I say, was to isolate and just ruminate in negative feelings and how awful I felt about myself. And that was probably one of the hardest things to not let go of, but try a different approach. That was probably something that came much later down the line. For me, I couldn't start there. I know some people can start there.
I would say that the mental piece around how I viewed myself and spoke to myself and viewed the situation had the biggest impact on how I felt post binge than any of the physical things I did, to be honest. And I think the mental piece of it doesn't just apply for post binge. It's something that we need to like adopt and try and put into practice throughout a lot of our recovery. But for me, I'm going to share something that I'd heard. And this was where there was a bit of a mental shift for me. And I don't know, I'd be really interested to hear how you would have perceived this,
Okay.
because I can't remember who shared it or where I heard it now, but somebody said, if you can start to see binges as not your enemy, but your friend, then you open up like an opportunity for learning, because you can't put things into practice or try and challenge certain like belief systems or ways that you talk about yourself. You can't challenge that unless you're in a situation where you need to challenge it. And when you've had a binge and all this all or nothing thinking is coming in, or the shame talk is coming in, or you're spiraling to this whole narrative about how bad of a person you are, that's when you can actually challenge it, not when it's just an average day of the week and you're feeling quite comfortable in your body and you feel like you've eaten in a way that you're comfortable with. There isn't a reason to challenge it then. And for me, hearing that was an absolute game changer because it completely shifted my mentality about how I viewed binges and approached them. And that is what led to being able to bring in like curiosity and compassion, and it allowed me to tackle the shame piece, which we can talk about more today. But it wasn't until I heard that and had that mindset shift of a binge is a friend, not an enemy, it made sense.
So if I think back to that time, I can't remember how I heard it. I can't remember whether it was actually when I was working with a coach or whether it was before that. And it was a similar kind of approach in the viewing a binge as a form of communication, right? So it's trying to say something. So although I was absolutely not in a place to meet myself with compassion, because I was very reluctant to let the shame and the guilt go, because I think it felt like if I let that go, then I'm accepting this behavior, I'm condoning this behavior, and then I'm never going to stop it. Like I'm just going to allow it to happen and I'm just going to become placid and just binge all the time. But viewing it more as, okay, if this isn't willpower, if this isn't about self-control, if this is something more than that, if this is about so many other things and food is becoming a way in which you are trying to speak up, then that opens the door for curiosity, doesn't it? That means that it's okay, as you said, like if this is information, how
Yeah.
can I learn from this? Or what can I take away from this? And even if that information that you get, for me, a lot of my binging was I really struggled to speak up, and just about how I was feeling in general, I kept pushed down. And so even just recognizing that's probably playing a part here, not with the pressure to have to fix it, not with the pressure to be like, okay, so now I need to start talking. Now I need to speak up. Now I need to say how I feel when I feel it. But just to create that awareness and start to make connections, it helped me detach a little bit from the binge. So although I couldn't necessarily view it as a binge being a friend, I could see it as, if I don't look at this as being like the worst thing ever, if I
Mhm.
can separate it from my worth and what I'm making it mean of me, what am I left with here? What can I start to piece together to give myself some insight and some clarity to understand what's actually going on here?
That's exactly what it allowed me to do as well.
Hmm.
Because what you're describing there for me is that curiosity, like getting curious about why something is happening for us. So for me, it was like, what was hurting? What was I trying to heal that was hurting? What was I trying to numb? What was I trying to avoid? What need did I have that wasn't being met? And I was trying to get that need met somehow through this food. These are all of the questions I would ask myself when I got to that curiosity piece. Even also things like, what were the early warning signs that I was going to binge? That's still curiosity, but not so much around like the psychological side of it. But were there early warning signs that I saw that this was going to happen? Were there other kind of vulnerabilities that I was exposed to that weekend that did make me more prone to having a binge? And just building up that awareness of everything. It's really interesting that you say that through doing that, it helps you detach from the binge. That sounds like to me like you're separating from the binge and being able to observe it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess for me, it's quite interesting because I viewed it differently. Like internally, the way I viewed it was like leaning into that binge and moving towards it. It's the
Yes.
same thing. It's the exact same thing, really, what we're doing, but a different way of viewing it. Because what I feel like I tended to do was I would have a binge and I would try to deny the fact that I'd had that binge, or I'd try to avoid it. So that would be like going to sleep and just trying to shut off from it completely, or throwing myself into something that would be a complete distraction and just, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to think about the binge. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to try and move on. That's it. That's there. And I'm here and I'm just going to shut that off. But really what I was doing through trying to move away from it like that, I wasn't actually accepting the binge. I was just trying to like move on as if it had never existed. And it didn't work. It didn't really help. I think before the curiosity part, I had to work on accepting that I'd actually binged. And for me, accepting was, instead of moving away from this binge and trying to distract or avoid, I'm going to move towards it. I feel like you got something to say about that.
I love it when we have different experiences. I fully understand what you're saying. And yet for me, I was like, you will feel crap about this binge. You will remember this binge. You will punish yourself for this, because that's the only way you're going to actually make any change. You're not allowed to escape this. You sit and you think about what you've done. You feel like this because you deserve to feel like this, because you've done something that you shouldn't have done and you told yourself you wouldn't do it. And lo and behold, you've done it again. So it was like, you sit in your bubble of feeling horrible and berating myself and just being really cruel to myself, because disconnected from it, if I tried to pull back from it, that's your way of accepting this behavior and making it okay. It's just interesting that we both had different approaches with it.
Yours feels like a critical parent, moving from being a really critical parent to a really kind, soothing, gentle parent. That's what yours feels like. Mine feels like running away and then going towards.
When I'm speaking about it, I'm like, man, you are just really mean to yourself. Like, this
Really
was
hard.
vicious. I'd be curious to hear about your opinion on this as well. One of the things that I really tried to pay attention to post binge when I was in recovery was, and this sort of falls into the realm of the mental piece, where I needed to stop saying to myself, that's the last time that will ever happen. You will never do that again. You can't binge again. I don't know how to word this, but because a binge held so much power for me, and it had the ability to make me crumble and completely shake me, it really had me in such a tight grip. When I say this is going to sound overly simplistic, but this was a process. This was over a period of time, probably similar to what you were saying earlier, but like approaching it with my eyes wide open. These binges are going to happen. That's okay. The expectation that this will be the last binge really just set me up with so much pressure that it became white knuckling. This can't happen. This can't happen. And so when it did happen, it just felt like this all encompassing feeling of failure. Recovery was thinking, okay, I'm probably going to binge. Okay, let's accept that. That's going to happen. But where I do get to change things is how I meet myself afterwards and how I navigate the aftermath. That's where my power is. That's where I can start to feel like I get a say. Was that in any way coherent?
Yeah, no, that did make sense. I don't feel like I really need to
Who'd have thought?
word it for you. I think that what we talk about is shifting the way we view binges is actually paramount to that, moving away from feeling like this is going to be the last binge. And the way I see it is because when you're telling yourself this is going to be the last binge, you're saying that you are a better person when you don't binge. And optimally, to be your best version of yourself, or to be the ideal version of yourself, you need to not be binging. So you're putting a lot on binging. It's, if you do binge, you're not a good person. And if you don't binge, then you're a good person. Whereas when you start to go, actually, binge is an opportunity for me to learn more about myself and what my needs are, then there isn't so much resistance to the binge and saying that it has to be the last one, because you're aware that actually from the binging, you can develop as a person as well. And you're not saying that if you didn't binge, you would be your ideal version of yourself or the best version of yourself. I don't know if that actually makes it clearer or more confusing, but that's how I view it.
The morality that comes with binging, isn't it? The way that our opinions of ourselves completely change based on our behavior around food. And this was real prominent for me because when food was going well, I really felt quite euphoric about it. That was a huge piece for me, trying to work on that post-binge feeling. And I couldn't meet myself with compassion for quite a long time. That was a slow burn. But I think I've talked about this before. It was more a case of approaching it with this no tolerance for being mean to myself policy to try and, again, separate what I was attaching to this binge, how I was making it mean that I was this really gluttonous, pathetic person. That's how it got before recovery when it was really bad. I just felt so ashamed and so embarrassed about my behavior around food. How I felt about myself was completely attached or based on the way food had been. And so being able to separate how I felt about myself and building that up in a way that had nothing to do with the way that food was, that was like the hardest thing, but the most effective thing, I would say. Again, it was that slow burn because there was a lot of resistance to that.
What it sounds like you're describing there is you no longer defined yourself by the binge. And I think going back to what you said about how do you move away from saying this is going to be the last binge, when you stop defining yourself by the binge, you can move away from telling yourself that promise. I found it really helpful to actually have that as an affirmation for myself post binge, to say, I am not defined by this binge. I am still figuring it out. Or it's okay. This is an opportunity for me to learn. These are all the kind of things I would actually say to myself. It felt almost like I was trying to like parent myself or mother myself by sort of, if you imagine if you had a child who was really distressed or upset about something, it doesn't even have to be a child, but this is the way I view it. It could be a friend. You would want to say these things to them. You would want to say, look, it's okay. You're not a bad person. You're not defined by this. You're still figuring this out. You would say all those things to them. And it was almost like learning to parent myself by doing that. That's how I viewed it. But it's fascinating what you said about compassion, that didn't come in for a very long time for you, but you had the curiosity part there. Because for me, in my experience, I found it hard to do the curiosity without the compassion. Like they almost came together for me because I had the tendency, if the compassion wasn't there and I just tried to do the curiosity, I slipped too much into being judgmental and analytical and trying to figure everything out. Whereas curiosity and compassion together changed. So how do you feel you did curiosity without compassion? Like, how did you do curiosity without it being judgmental?
Okay, when I think about you speaking about affirmations, I was very resistant to that. I never believed them, so it felt invalidating and it felt like I was telling myself a lie, right?
Mhm.
One thing that I did, which I did working with a coach, was to insert doubt into my beliefs that I had about myself. So although I couldn't meet myself with this, hey, it's okay, you've done nothing wrong, because my brain would go to, you're this, you're that, your long list of things. My sort of phrase that I leaned on was, what if that's not the whole truth?
Mm.
What if that's not the full story? What if there's room for doubt here? And I didn't necessarily have to follow it through because, especially that initial post binge, it's really hard to access that kind of stuff because you're very set on how you feel and there's so much going on. But even reflecting a few days later, just inserting that doubt into how I felt about myself, of like, maybe this isn't completely true, and there's a chance that you're not terrible and that you're not pathetic without the pressure of having to fill it with something like, you're a really nice person, because that just never landed with me.
How do you respond to praise? Are you someone like loved ones praise you? How do you respond to that? Do you like it, or are you
I
no?
need it. I really need
Okay.
it. Probably in an over the top kind of way. It's when it's
Yeah.
coming from me that it's met with an eye roll. So in that, the second part that you were saying, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me today? It's like I'm working on one brain cell.
What did I say? What I said was that I had to do compassion and curiosity together, because otherwise
Yeah.
it turned to judgment and like being overly analytical instead.
I think it's really important that I speak about the fact that I was working intensely with a coach at this stage where my compassion came through her.
Mm.
So I couldn't cultivate it for myself. We had daily WhatsApp. So I would hear her giving me compassion and over time chipped away at me.
Hmm.
Similar to the inserting doubt, over time it was then, oh, okay, maybe I'm not this terrible person. Maybe this is okay. Maybe it's okay to not absorb myself in this shame and guilt. Maybe it's okay for me to offer myself this compassion. So it came from someone else first. And that's what I do with clients with the WhatsApp coaching. I think it's really helpful. Some people where I leave a message and I'm like, I know you're not going to absorb this. I know you're not going to want to take this, and that's okay, but I'm going to say it anyway because somewhere in your brain it's going to be absorbed, and I'm going to keep telling you this and I'm going to keep
Yeah.
chipping away. So I had someone else being that voice of compassion for me to then help me cultivate that for myself. I don't think I could have done that single handedly because I think I was so shut off to the idea of it.
Hmm. Yeah. So the compassion was there. It was just from an external source. And
Yes.
I have seen that for sure when working with clients, like
Mm.
in a therapeutic sense, that they haven't been able to access that themselves. But by me having compassion for them and also just asking them, like, how, if you were to view this in a compassionate way, how would that look? And even if they don't have an answer right now, that is opening their minds up to just the idea of it, really.
Mm.
And over time, they have been able to view themselves from a compassionate lens. Um,
Yes.
and and you sharing that has also made me think about one of the things that really helped me in accepting binges, because I feel like I couldn't do all of this curiosity and compassion, etc., until I actually accepted the binges for what
Mm.
they were.
Mhm.
And accepting them came from sharing them with another person. And for me, this was Will.
Mm.
We weren't together at the time, but we were friends. And I told him what I binged on. And I'd never, ever shared this with anyone before. I told people I binged or struggled with binging, but actually telling anyone what that consisted of or what that actually looked like, I had never done because I felt so much shame about it. I thought, if I tell people I binge, they don't really have maybe they don't have a full understanding of that. So
Mm.
they still accept me. But if they actually knew what I'm binging on and the quantities of what I'm binging on and in what time frame, that might completely change their perception of me. They wouldn't accept me in the way that they do now. And I actually told him, I had a binge last night. This is what I ate. Da, 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 da. And I know it's not all about the food and the quantity, because you can have a very distressing binge and it cannot be like an objective binge. By that, I mean a large quantity of food. It could be a subjective binge, a small amount of food, and still be very distressing. But for me, there was something about, in order to accept it and work through some of the shame, I had to tell someone, this is what I binged on.
Mm.
And it was the way he handled it that made me feel like maybe I can accept this in myself as well,
Mhm.
because he just hugged me. That was all he did. He just hugged me. And he was like, that doesn't change anything. It doesn't change anything about how I view you as a person or value you. I accept you
You give me
completely.
goosebumps, Will.
I know, he's such a sweetheart, isn't he? And that for me was like absolutely mind blowing that somebody could hear what I binged on and didn't view me as less than or disgusting or weird or wrong, that they still just saw me for me. Yeah, it makes me feel quite emotional actually. It made me think maybe I can just accept myself for me. I don't have to be defined by those binges and I can accept them.
Yeah.
It was powerful.
In a moment where we really abandon ourselves and we believe that we are not lovable and we are not worthwhile, to have someone meet you in that space and connect with you and basically tell you the complete opposite. That was where the coaching, the WhatsApp support was so helpful for me because, again, it was the first time that I was actually transparent with what I was eating, how much I was eating, and to have someone come back and be that safe space and whose opinion of me has not changed, to have in that moment to feel so awful about yourself and to have someone hold out their hand to you, that was just detrimental, I think, because there is so much shame around binging. You carry that shame with you. And it takes so much courage and bravery, I think, to turn around and say, this is what is actually happening for
Mhm.
me. And that fear of what can happen as a result of speaking up like that. And when it's met with such kindness and acceptance, in whatever form that is, it does something, doesn't it?
It really heals something on a soul level to feel
Mm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actually, it's you said there that you were really transparent about what you binged on with your coach. That's the first time you'd done that. Something I did after that time of telling Will what I binged on was I started to, when I was journaling, if I had binged and then I was journaling after I'd binged, I would actually write down everything I binged on. This might not be an approach for everyone because actually writing that down for some people could make them feel worse. With everything that we share, take what works for you, what
Mm.
helps you, and leave the rest because it's you know yourself and it's your recovery. But I actually found it helpful after that experience to write down everything that I binged on, the start of my journal entry, and then journal about how I was feeling, what was
Mm-hmm.
going on for me, all of that other side of it, do all like the emotional work afterwards. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I've always wondered, like, why did that help me? Like, why did it
Mm.
help me to write
Yeah.
that down? And I actually think in this conversation today, I've realized why, because what I was doing was what you were doing with your coach, sharing it transparently.
Mm.
I wasn't running away from it. I was accepting it and going, I ate this and I still accept myself.
How insightful is this podcast for you, Becca? This is what I like about these conversations, and that we both are coming at it in different ways and we both have different experiences. And as you say, something may help you and something may not, and you can pick and choose. Because for me, I would track my binges on a calorie counting app, but I was doing it as a way of punishing myself of look what you've done. Look at it. Look
Mm.
at that number. Look at all of that food. You've just eaten that. Look at it. Look at that minus whatever number because you've gone over. It's like that wagging finger of telling me off, but it was hidden away. I think probably to conclude this episode, not everything is going to work for everyone. And just because something doesn't feel right now doesn't mean it won't be something that you later incorporate. Because there was a lot of things when I first heard that I was like, absolutely not, never doing that. That actually turned out to be really crucial in my recovery.
Yeah. I think what you've highlighted there is important in kind of the intention behind why we're doing something. So the way you wrote down everything that you
Mhm.
binged was to berate yourself and to track it in terms of what you felt you should be eating or what calories you should be consuming. Whereas the way I did it was to look at it, face it, accept myself, and then move into like exploring that. It- Similar things, but really different intentions behind it. So think that's just something for people to be aware of when you do these things. What is the intention behind this? Have you got a compassionate intention behind it, or is it a critical intention?
That is a great conclusion. Can I just say? Because I'm terrible
I
at
don't know.
ending and I'm terrible at starting. But I feel like this episode and maybe most of the episodes are like me trying to formulate a sentence and then you follow up and tie it in a nice neat bow.
I don't feel like that at all.
Did you
Actually,
not? When you
no.
said, "Oh, the intention matters," I'm like, yes, that is the point I was trying to make. But alas, could I make it? Nope.
I feel like it's just really helpful to hear the different ways we perceive things, isn't it?
Mm. But that was a lovely conclusion, so I'm not even going to continue and butcher it. That was lovely, and we hope you take something away and hopefully see you in the
Yeah.
next one.
Yeah, hopefully it's been helpful. Like always, if you have things that have worked for you, like post
Mm-hmm.
binge, please do share them in the comments because I think the more input we have, the more that helps other people because
Mm-hmm.
different things will work for different people. So please do share that. And likewise, I just want to put an invite out there. If actually you have never told someone what you've binged on and what we've spoken about today has really landed for you, and I need to share that with someone to overcome that shame, but I haven't got anyone that I can share that with, then you can message us. We're not going to judge
Yeah,
whatever you've eaten. Like we can be that person to give you that if you need it.
that is wonderful, Becca. Thank you so much for listening.